Okay, I think we're ready to start. Welcome, everyone, on this starting to snow morning. We've had remarkably good weather, I think, during this whole program. But today we did get, the hated wintry mix, and now turning to snow. So that's where we are. But welcome to everyone in the room. We've got about 10 people in the room and about 20 people online from, at least the last we checked, it was Mount Vernon, some people up in Lynn County. Mike Carberry, I see, is there. Solon, Better Together, and a person from Better Together is here. And we're asking people to introduce themselves online, so who's here. But we have a small but strong group here in the room. So some of whom are regulars, I think quite a few regulars, and there are some new people though whose names I didn't recognize before. So we would like, I don't see any laptops, all the audios should be off in the room because it'll interfere with this OWL device. And people online, we've turned off your videos and audios. We're going to ask you to turn on your video at the very end of the program so we can see you and wave goodbye. So my name is Cheryl Miller, and I've been hosting this series this winter. Anne Guyen, my sidekick, is not here today. So Stephanie Verdinas from Merge, or actually the director of First Impressions with ICAD, has generously stepped in and taken over to run the technical part of this meeting. Thanks very much to Merge and ICAD for the space that we've been using, and the expertise and equipment have all been really high class, and very happy to have this available to us. And thank you to our funders, the Community Foundation of Iowa City, or of Johnson County, and Cook Appraisal LLC, who is co-sponsoring this breakfast series. For those people in particular that are new here, I wanted to say a few things about Johnson Clean Energy District, the sponsor of this program. We are a 3-year-old nonprofit organization, volunteer run, that is dedicated to the transition to clean, renewable energy in Johnson County. That's a pretty massive undertaking, as we all know, and it's driven by climate change, obviously, but also a real interest in bringing clean energy prosperity, better jobs or good jobs, good business opportunities, cleaner air, lower energy costs to our region. So those are the kinds of things that our organization is trying to figure out how to help advance here. We're a very small organization, so our MO must be to partner with as many other organizations as possible, government, business, building trades, and others. We have a number of projects going so far. We started out by raising money and providing LEDs and low flow shower heads to low income housing groups to give to their clients. We have a little newsletter, it's called Good Energy, comes out 4 times a year, every season, to give people energy tips about how to lower their energy use and carbon footprint. It's distributed through community newsletters around Johnson County and other groups through their online newsletters. So we're getting a nice size readership in that way for that kind of information. We're just starting to build a program with Kirkwood College and the Home Builders Association to provide technical assistance to homeowners that are interested in energy efficiency upgrades. Ways to help people or do more streamlined energy assessments in homes, to let people know what they might prioritize when they're thinking about energy upgrades. We're Also planning a program this spring to make the rounds to public libraries to talk about this new Inflation Reduction Act and the kinds of incentives, financial incentives that it provides to homeowners for all kinds of energy efficiency upgrades. So hopefully it will be coming to a town near you very soon. Keep your eye out for that. And these solar energy breakfasts is the other major thing that we've been working on, figuring out how to do hybrid meetings so that we can talk to people directly and kind of foster this whole discussion and building of interest in how to work on solar here in Johnson County. A little bit of background for those who also are coming to these breakfasts for the first time is that in 2020, Johnson Clean Energy District organized a research project to look at solar energy in Iowa City. We worked with the university's Initiative for Sustainable Communities and public policy and solar experts in the area to put together a report called eventually Iowa City Solar 2035. And what it describes is a 10-year initiative to bring more distributed solar, that is standalone rooftop solar arrays, customer-owned solar to Iowa City and the surrounding area. We suggested that putting that on critical infrastructure would be a smart place to start, other important buildings, and that would be a good complement to the utility-owned electricity that we depend on. The principal goals of such a program, we believe, is to provide immediate carbon reductions to meet the Iowa City's greenhouse gas goals, to reduce long-term energy costs on the city's buildings, schools, commercial districts, businesses, wherever, to improve the reliability of the energy supply during power outages, if you also have storage, solar energy and storage, and to improve the equitable access to solar for people who can't afford to put it on their own homes, or people who don't have a solar suitable house, people who are renters, whatever. So those goals of doing those kinds of things, we believe would make sense to increase the amount of distributed solar in our area, which right now is only about 1% of the electricity load in Iowa City. It's an ambitious program. We presented or proposed that the idea would be a 10-year program. It became a lot easier to even think about doing something like that with the Inflation Reduction Act passage last summer, which will lower the price of doing something like that by 30% for governments, for businesses, for nonprofits, for homeowners. So that those two things, having that body of research and then the new financial incentives, led us to decide to take this kind of information and put it out to a broader audience around Johnson County. And we started these solar energy breakfasts, hybrid meetings, in order to do that. We have had terrific speakers for the last 3 sessions who talked about kind of the whole planning, ordinances and city codes and that kind of information in the first presentation. The legal background for solar, some of the issues that need to be worked out. Public policy at the State House, particularly, was the topic of discussion last month. What is either going to help or hinder the expansion of solar energy in Iowa, and financial issues, both the Inflation Reduction Act, which Steve Geyer spoke about one of our meetings, and today the private sector finance. We've also had terrific participation from the community. This has been a great room to run a meeting in. The energy has always been excellent. People talking about solar and, and the different aspects of it they're involved with. The electrical union have been regulars at this meeting. It's been wonderful to see political leaders, local officials, just many people getting together to chat about this. All these meetings are recorded and will be or are already on our website. We're planning to consolidate them into something that's a little bit more digestible soon. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Casey Cook, who is going to run the next part of the meeting about the whys and wherefores of private money in funding solar. Casey has direct experience in this. He retired from Cook Appraisal several years ago and turned his attention to solar philanthropy, is what I call it, helping nonprofit organizations put solar onto their buildings. So I've asked him to talk a little bit about his own experience and then to introduce this morning's panel.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. This is my idea of a good time. So it shows you what a nerd I am. And I want to thank all you folks for checking in, particularly our people who are going to be on the panel today. Well, I'll briefly introduce Chris Hoffman, Mike Ludeking, and Jason McDuff. I really appreciate you guys checking in, and it's snowing like crazy in Iowa City, and I'm doubtful that I'll be able to walk to the parking ramp, let alone have you drive 150 miles from Decorah. So thanks very much for being here. Chris Hoffman is a senior consultant for Eagle Point Solar, and he's also the mayor of North Liberty. So he wears a number of hats, and Chris is going to begin our discussion. He's going to begin our discussion and just kind of give us some background, and we'll have a chance to ask Chris questions. And Mike Ludeking is a commercial lender and vice president at Green Penny Bank, a division of Decorah Bank and Trust. Mike was an ag and commercial lender for 10 years before transitioning to Green Penny full-time. He has been financing solar and renewable energy projects for 8 years, most recently financing commercial and industrial, and I assume some ag stuff, as well as power purchase agreements and community solar gardens. So we're looking forward to hearing from Mike. And Jason is the owner of Green Penny Bank and has as much expertise as basically anybody in the room, I think. So, Jason, do you want to say anything more about yourself? That, you know, tell us about who you are and what your background is and that kind of thing.
Oops, mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute right now.
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me now? Very good. I'm Jason McDuff. I'm the president of Green Penny. We are a division of Decorah Bank and Trust, as you mentioned, and the bank, Decorah, Iowa, has one of the highest solar adoption rates of any community in the country, actually. And a lot of that happened because Decorah Bank and Trust financed a lot of that. And so the topic of today, enabling more communities to achieve high rates of renewable energy adoption through private capital and public investment, is something that we have some experience around because we've done it in our own community. And the bank started Green Penny to try to help accomplish that in more communities across the Midwest. So excited to be here to talk about that.
Thanks very much for being here.
You bet.
I'm hoping it catches on here in Iowa City. And I understand that you do quite a bit of work with other banks and you can do loans with other banks and that kind of thing.
Sure. Yep.
Chris, I understand you are in Florida right now attending, is it a dance recital for your daughter?
You caught me, Casey. I was hoping to stay under the radar and not rub it into you guys up there. So that would explain the underwater fish mural that I've attempted to blur out in my background. But yeah, that's where I am.
Well, before I was happily married for 43 years, I was looking at the personals. And all the women said, loves to dance, and all the men said, loves to play golf. And I thought, how do these people ever get together? So anyway, you might want to follow in the footsteps of your daughter and take up dancing.
Good point.
So can you start us off with your presentation?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And let me just need a shot at sharing my screen if you guys don't mind. Just says that it's disabled here on my side. There we go. Thank you. Right, you should be able to see solar project financing now in front of you.
See that?
All right, thanks. All right. Well, as Casey mentioned in my bio, I've been an advocate of solar, actually been working directly in the solar industry for almost 9 years now. 9 years ago, solar wasn't really highly adopted, obviously. And when I was talking to a potential customer about solar, we really had to hypothesize about what it would look like on a roof, what it might look like outside of the farm or on the roof of a business. But as time has gone on, we've obviously been able to incorporate solar in everyone's life. You either all have it at your house or you walk past it, driven past it on a pretty regular basis. Along the way, there's been a lot of education, not only to the consumer, but to the utilities and to the jurisdictions. Many of on this meeting today, I've worked with in the past in some capacity, whether you're at the county or a homeowner or a business operating out there. And Casey and I are an example of that. He and I have worked together on projects that he may be humbly not mentioning here this morning, but that's what he's really driven to do over the last number of years as well. So my presentation today isn't about how solar works, and it's not about what solar, how good it is for the environment, but I'm targeting a specific audience of folks that will either want to buy it themselves, want to help the community that they're in, and do their part for solar. Getting there, you have to pay for it somehow. So I'm going to kind of cue this up and work through this a little bit with the understanding that you all know how the technology works right now. And many of you do, that when that energy hits the grid, you start to receive a financial benefit from it. How will that look for you? But also, depending upon who you are, how will you pay for it? And that's really the intent of my time here this morning. So the review that I will do is that we're going to talk about mostly is how tax credits work and how a business entity will affect how they're going to finance a project. But it's important for us to start with understanding a term called net metering. And net metering is just simply the utility policies use of and how they will handle excess solar production. Every utility company across the US will have a form of a net metering policy in place. They may not call it net metering, but they have to do something with your excess energy every day, every minute, every monthly billing cycle that they have out there. So I'll review that briefly on the next slide, but we're also going to spend time then just talking about the tax credit and the business entities. So briefly, in review, the net metering policies locally for us, these are the 4 largest utilities that represent us around in Johnson County, with Alliant, Mid-Am, Lynn County REC, and Eastern Iowa Light and Power. They are all going to have different rules on what happens when you create excess energy that you're not using right then when it's created, and that's what's called net metering. Solar energy, size of the solar array is not the wild, wild west. It might have felt like it 5, 6, 7, 9 years ago, but the utility companies really care about how much excess energy you might possibly create. And that's why they set limits on how large your solar arrays can be. So you can see that both Alliant and Mid-American will allow you to create energy that's up to 110% of the energy that you used in the past year. Lynn County REC doesn't have a limit on that energy use, and Eastern Iowa Light and Power will allow you to put a solar array up that's a 20 kW system. Now, the energy cost for solar or for energy that you use are going to vary a little bit. Alliance Energy on average has the highest rate across our county, our region, but also across the state. And whereas Mid-Am and Lynn County and Eastern Iowa Light and Power will be a little bit more modestly. How that energy excess is then credited to you is really important. In that Alliant will allow you to create excess energy and get paid back for that energy cost at what you would have paid to them. So that 17 cents is about what you'll get back from excess energy that you create on a monthly basis in their billing cycle. They don't let you carry forward kilowatt hours anymore. They let you carry forward these dollars and cents into the next month's billing cycle. The same thing happens within Mid-American Energy. Now, both of these utilities will allow you to carry this credit in dollars and cents forward monthly, except one time a year they zero out that balance, and that's typically in the month of April. So we try to size a solar array, and they don't allow us to go larger than 110% for that reason. Lynn County REC, as I say, doesn't have a system size limit for their solar array, but they don't credit you excess energy production the same as Mid-Am or Alliant does. They simply treat you as a provider of that energy, just like they're buying it from their service provider. So they'll only pay you 2 cents or so per kilowatt hour on excess energy that you create. So there doesn't begin to be any financial incentive for making excess energy that you really don't use on an annual basis. And finally, Eastern Iowa Light and Power has a similar program, except they have on and off peak usage time period. So if you create energy in an on-peak scenario, that's their highest rate for electricity, you'll get credit in that on-peak scenario. But if you create it at a time when they don't really have a lot of demand and you're in an off-peak, you're only getting credit in those dollars and cents at that lower cost as well. So I'll stop with the net metering, but it's important to understand how the excess energy that you create, if it happens, will be credited back to you, because that's also part of the financial decisions that you'll make as the owner of that array. Overarchingly, there's so many things. I talked to Cheryl about this last week, and I want to put together a table that's simple, easy to read. And as a result of that, it's probably not going to answer every single one of your questions about how the tax credits will work for a solar array. But we can get into those conversations later or on different days. But fundamentally, though, the solar projects will have a 30% federal credit that comes back to anyone that makes that investment if they have tax credit or tax liability, that they can offset. So if you're a homeowner or a business entity that's for profit, you can take a federal tax credit up to that's 30% of that project's cost, as long as you have tax liability to offset. And I'll come back to that several times here yet this morning. A homeowner cannot depreciate that investment, but the business property can. So this provides a little extra incentive financially for a business to adopt solar energy there at their work. And finally, a nonprofit, as you can understand, doesn't have the ability to take either a tax credit or depreciation. So it's important now to understand who owns the solar array. If you're a homeowner, if you're a for-profit business, or maybe you're a for-profit business that's sourced as an LLC or an ESOP, or if you're a nonprofit, you're all going to take different routes on how you finance your solar projects because of those benefits of net metering and also of the tax credits and depreciation that you might get. So I'll go through this a little bit more in detail. If you're a homeowner, you will be able to take that tax credit as long as you have federal tax liability to offset. So if you're retired and receiving benefits that aren't taxable, the tax credit is not of any value to you. But for the most part, folks are going to receive income either through payroll or maybe some of their retirement investments that pay out every month that they do have to pay a federal tax on. The tax credit will be of help to you. How you invest in solar is pretty straightforward in most ways. We've got investment folks on this presentation as well that'll go into a little bit more detail on financing. but you can pay for it right out of pocket. And when you do so, you avoid any borrowing costs, and this is going to be your quickest payback for making that investment in solar. But not everybody has that much money available to pull that off, so they are going to either borrow money through maybe a home equity loan that they might have in place right now, or get direct financing through an organization like Green Penny, which we utilize at Eagle Point Solar as well. And it's a terrific way to make that direct investment in your offsetting your electric costs. If you're an S corporation or a C corporation to do financing, you're going to be able to take that 30% federal tax credit as well. That is, you're also going to be able to depreciate that asset. And if you're a business owner on this call or looking at this later on, you recognize that depending upon what your asset is, you have a different depreciation schedule for that. The depreciation schedule for solar has been teed up pretty well for us, and it's pretty aggressive. If you have the ability to do so, you can take all the depreciable value of your solar investment and get it back in that first year. And not only are you going to be getting it back, you're going to be getting back 85% of that investment's cost basis for depreciation. So let's say you have a $100,000 solar project investment. Most assets are going to have a schedule that might pay back depreciation in 5 years or possibly longer, depending upon what it is. The solar array can all be taken back in that first year. And the schedule for that, because you're getting a 30% federal tax credit, you should only be able to take 70% of it as your cost basis, but the IRS allows you to take half of that credit and use it towards your cost basis. So you get 85% of your project's cost then that can be used as your cost basis. Paying for the solar array as an S Corp or a C Corp is very similar to a homeowner in that you'll have capital on hand to pull that off, or that you can budget out for it, or you can borrow those funds in whatever capacity that you have loans set up for right now. Additionally, corporations can lease those solar arrays. You'll notice that I didn't mention that for a homeowner, and in Iowa, there's not really a financial incentive to do that. We don't pay really high rates back there. Making that investment is rather inexpensive. And the benefits of making that investment yourself as a homeowner far and away exceed the benefits of the lease. But if you're a corporation, leasing might be a possibility for you, and it also keeps then that asset or that investment off the books, and it allows you to free up capital for other purposes if you want to. But it's also going to slow down your payback time period. So it is going to be an option for you, but it's going to be the slowest return on that investment, only because it's not something that you can take a tax credit for and you can't depreciate it. You're just reducing your monthly expenses on utilities, if you want to look at it that way. If you're an LLC or an ESOP, those types of entities, the ESOPs especially, are becoming more and more familiar to businesses. You have some companies that have 500 plus employees that are all owners of those companies. Or if you're an LLC and you have 5 or 6 different partners in there, the tax treatment of those credits is not always going to be equal. You may have 6 people that are involved in an LLC, one of which is retired and doesn't benefit at all from any tax credits. So those types of entities, yeah, they can get the tax credit, but it might not equally distribute to all of the owners. So they might not want to finance it in those traditional terms. So a lease operation, financing a solar project through an operating lease is likely to be the most financially advantaged way to pull that off if you're an LLC or an ESOP. And by doing so, you're like I said earlier, you're not making it's not something on the books. It's not something that you have to set aside on the balance sheet. It's only a monthly payment that you're making, and it's much more easier, and you write that off and to absorb it out there in those organizations. You can also make an investment in the solar project through something called a power purchase agreement, and that's similar to an operating lease, but the power purchase agreement simply is the ability of the sun to create electricity through the solar array, and that's how you make those payments as well. So both the operating lease and the power purchase agreement allow an LLC or an ESOP to keep those assets off the books, not something that they have to set aside capital for. And it allows easier access to those funds. And then they just make monthly payments on either the sun shining or in a lease program, you have a fixed monthly cost for making that investment. And finally, a nonprofit, a city, a county, a school, they obviously don't have tax liability that they're going to be able to use to benefit this financially. They are, though, going to be able to make that investment directly if they want to. We've worked with school districts over the years that have something called a PEPL fund, and those dollars can only be used for the expansion of physical assets. A school building, a solar array fits into that category. So schools in the last number of years, even though they can't take any tax credits, they get no benefit at all from the tax code, have been buying solar arrays themselves through these PEPL funds because they really don't have any other purpose or use that they can have for them. But that's changed. As Cheryl said in the beginning of this, as most of you in the audience know, the Inflation Reduction Act created a way for a nonprofit to take that tax credit, I say that in quotes, of 30%, and receive an actual payment from the IRS for that investment in that solar project. We don't know, Steve's in the audience there. I always look to him for guidance on where that language is being written right now. And unless he has something new to add, I don't think it's been quite clarified yet. We're all waiting for those definitions. But we do know that the solar investment is going to yield a 30% check back to those nonprofits to make that happen, if they have the money on hand and the budget for that. And for those of you in the audience and anybody that works with a nonprofit, you understand that they don't necessarily have that much money sitting in capital funds to make that happen. So a very common way to finance a solar project, as Casey and I have done in the past and others will do, is through a power purchase agreement. Those power purchase agreements do not require any upfront costs, so the nonprofit can get into them. And what they're simply buying in is those kilowatt hours of energy that the solar array creates in the next 15, 20, 25 years down the road. So as you can see, and Cheryl, I wasn't watching my time. I've done this a few times. I think I'm inside of my 15 minutes there for you, but the solar array investment is going to vary on the entity type, as you will have seen here this morning. So depending upon how you're set up, will determine which path you take to make that investment. And as I have on the screen here, there's not one size that fits all. It's really going to depend upon the benefits that you can derive from the tax code and how your capital budget works. So with that, I will press pause and turn this back over to you guys.
Thanks very much, Chris. We
My
appreciate
pleasure.
your insight. Mike and Jason, what I have a list of questions that I've provided you guys with, but we want to start out and I'm, just flesh these out as you go along, but I'll just start you out. Tell us a little bit about your portfolio, give a range of the deal sizes and the number of defaults that you've had.
Well, yeah, I mean, this whole concept of how do we pay for solar investments as we help communities and folks transition to clean energy, financing is going to be a huge part of that. We often say that just as the industrial age was largely financed by commercial banks, so too will the renewable energy age require financing. It's a pretty significant capital investment for folks. Our average loan size for our residential program is about $42,000. That's a pretty substantial investment, I think. All of us would agree for the average homeowner. We also do commercial projects of all different types. So ag facilities. Chris talked a lot about nonprofits and PPAs. We finance a lot of those. For municipalities, for school districts, for universities, for hospitals, for churches. just straight commercial enterprises that are wanting to reduce their and fix their electricity costs. We finance those as well. And so the real way that we try to make it affordable for folks is starting from the premise of trading your utility payment for a financing payment that hopefully whomever is the borrower can pay off as quickly as possible, because as you all may know, solar systems are routinely warranted now for 25 plus years. Battery systems are typically 10 plus years. So the sooner the financing can be paid off, the more, as Chris was mentioning, quicker payback if you can write a check for it. But a lot of folks, probably most folks, can't. So the quickest payoff is to pay off the financing arrangements as quickly as possible and then enjoy many years of hopefully fairly de minimis utility costs, depending upon how much you're able to offset your energy usage. So we start from that premise. How can we structure the loan facilities, whomever the borrower is, so that we're trading a utility payment for a financing payment that hopefully can be paid off quickly, and therefore the real benefits of net metering, the value of what the utility will pay for the solar, can be experienced. So there's several ways that we can do that. The federal tax incentives are something that we consider as we think about how we underwrite these. So for our residential program, we offer a single pay note structure as part of that. So if you're a homeowner that can take advantage of the federal income tax credit, you've got the tax appetite to do so, we can set aside 30% of the project costs, put that in what we call a single pay note. So you're not making a monthly payment on that note. And then when you get your tax refund, you simply pay this back, the 30% of the project cost plus whatever interest has accrued over that period. And that allows you to finance 70% of the project in a term note, and better enables the homeowner, particularly in areas that don't have as high a value for the solar production that's going to be happening, to be able to better trade your utility payment for a financing payment. That's one mechanism. We finance PPAs for nonprofits. So those investors that are coming in that will enable nonprofits to put up solar without any upfront expense, we will finance those investors to be able to do that. And of course, as Chris said, the motivation for them are the federal incentives, both the investment tax credits as well as depreciation. And for other enterprises, we'll do similar things where we'll finance the federal income tax credits as single pay notes. We also can do, for larger projects, more of a custom underwriting arrangement where through irregular payments, we can structure the loan terms such that you're better aligning what your actual electricity expenses might be. For example, we all know that electricity expenses are only projected to go up over time. So we can structure our loan payments so that they mimic what might happen with escalators with utility payments over time, to better mimic what might happen with your actual utility expense. So there's all sorts of ways that we can try to structure the financing arrangements so that they enable borrowers to trade, again, a utility payment for a financing payment, hopefully enable them to pay that off as quickly as possible so they can enjoy several years of pretty de minimis utility expense. That's kind of our goal. And so at Green Penny, you will not find a automatic, quick kind of approval process for these financing arrangements. They're relatively new. We pride ourselves on being transparent and providing very personalized service to our borrowers. So we really try to explain how the financing is going to work and make sure the borrower feels good about what their payment's going to be, how the financing is going to work, when we're going to close, what the interest rates are going to be, what any fees are going to be associated with the financing arrangement. So they're very, very, very clear on exactly what's going to happen to their budget when they enter into a financing arrangement for a solar system or a battery system or any renewable energy system. That's something that we really pride ourselves on. And if you're followed this industry at all, you know that there are companies out there, particularly large national, what are called fintech finance companies that maybe aren't as transparent in the disclosure of how the fees and the financing works. They support salespeople who might have high pressure sales tactics that are looking for kind of quick turnaround contract signing without maybe a lot of transparency behind them. We think that's a big problem in the industry, and we are doing our part to try to be the opposite of that, to try to be very transparent around how the financing works. So again, folks are really clear about what they're purchasing. Again, these are pretty major purchases for folks, and we want to make sure that they really understand how the economics are going to work for them. Finally, I'll just say, you asked, you know, what are our default rates and our experience around that. You know, really, so far in the loss history around financing is relatively young. As I think Cheryl said, in Iowa, roughly, or in Johnson County, roughly 1% of the energy production is solar. I think for the state, it's less than 2%. So it's relatively new. And so far, knock wood, we have not had a lot of loss history, and we've not experienced any losses. We've had situations where companies have gone out of business, and we've been in the middle of projects, a couple of projects, and thankfully we're working with borrowers to make sure they've got solutions to their issue and are going to be fine. But we expect that there will be losses over time in the space, just like there are in any form of lending, and we reserve for those. And so far, again, we've not had much experience with that. But you know, probably we think that's because these are relatively sophisticated borrowers. They're all by definition on the residential side homeowners. If they're commercial customers, we typically require that they've been in business for a while. If they're nonprofits, we require that their nonprofit's going to be around for a while. If we're financing an investor for a nonprofit, typically those are sophisticated borrowers as well. So generally speaking, the profile of the borrowers here is pretty strong, and our experience has been not any losses so far. So
thank you.
Yep.
I had two additional add-on questions for you, and see if I can remember them. How would you say the batteries are evolving, and are you making loans to batteries as well as arrays now? Has that become more common for you, or where does that stand now?
Certainly more common. I would say it's still relatively rare, as the cost of the battery systems are continuing to come down and are forecasted to continue to come down. We expect that they'll be more frequent. When we go to conferences, Solar Energy Industry Association conferences in the 5 states in which we lend, Iowa is one of those. We also lend in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Missouri. So we attend conferences in our markets. We also go to national conferences. There's a Renewable Energy Plus conference, which was in Anaheim last year. It's in Las Vegas this year. You might be interested to know it's now the largest energy conference in the country. Not renewable, not fossil fuel. It's period the largest energy conference now in the country. There was something like 25,000 people that attended this conference last year. And in all of them, you hear themes around several things. One, that the future is really battery storage in combination with the renewable energy generation system. So that could be solar, that could be wind, geothermal. The combination of the two is the future. And in fact, in Decorah, where we're from, Alliant is our utility provider here, and we generate so much renewable energy, mostly solar, in the town that Alliant had to put a utility scale battery storage facility in our community to absorb all of the excess power generation that we're producing here. and be able to release it at night or in down times or in peak times to be able to safely operate the grid here. So you see in California a lot of utility scale battery storage systems that are going in as they're trying to rapidly convert to renewable energy generation and modernize their grid infrastructure, particularly given a lot of the wildfires that have been started because of a pretty old grid system there. And to try to alleviate grid congestion and prevent what have been basically blackouts that they've been having to do in order to prevent during the summer, prevent fire risk. So battery storage is the future. As manufacturing builds and demand builds, the cost will come down and they'll become more common. But again, we are seeing increasingly battery systems being part of our solar systems, and the answer to whether or not we finance them is absolutely yes.
This is gonna kind of put you on the spot a little bit, but I'm really curious. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Have you the bank itself invested in solar for your own operations?
Oh yeah. Yes, in fact, we're very proud of the fact that several years ago, Decorah Bank and Trust, in its own operations, can say that we operate in a carbon neutral fashion. And the way we do that is a combination of things. First, our buildings are Energy Star certified, so we have LED lighting, we have recycled insulation. We do everything we can to try to operate as we obviously recycle. We do everything we can to try to operate as efficiently as possible. And then we power our buildings renewably. So all of our buildings actually have solar on them. Even our drive-through, one of our drive-through branches has solar on its on the land that's around it. One of our buildings is geothermally heated. And then from there, anything that we cannot offset by operating efficiently or renewably powering the facilities, we track. So the carbon emissions that our operations generate, everything from business travel to employee commutes is tracked. And then we offset that through donations to our local energy district. In fact, the Winnebago County Energy District, Winnebago County being the county that Decorah resides in, our understanding is the first energy district in the country, and is helping, as you all may know, Andy Johnson and team at the Winnebago County Energy District are helping spur energy districts like Johnson County's energy district all over the country. The bank is a big donator to the local energy district to help them do projects for buildings, for residents, homeowners, ag facilities, nonprofits, operate their buildings more efficiently, renewably power them, and thereby reducing carbon emissions in our area. And so kind of like a carbon offset tag, if you will. Those donations help reduce carbon that offsets the carbon that we can't eliminate ourselves. And so we operate carbon neutrally. And I think personally, both Mike and I have solar. Our CEO has solar. Our CEO drives an electric vehicle. We have electric chargers at our facilities as well. I have a Lightning that I'm going to be picking up here in the next month. I just learned, in fact, this week. So yeah, we are personally very big believers in renewable power and electric vehicles, and doing our part through our professional lives and also our personal lives to help reduce carbon emissions and prevent an untenable warming of this planet.
I love that answer. I wonder about opportunities that you see. I see all these convenience stores, and not so much electrical chargers, but certainly the canopies, the amount of electricity used for coolers and that kind of thing. And it's so hard to get rid of overhead.
Yeah.
And utilities are overhead, And I'm
Sure.
wondering what kind of an opportunity that might be for you. Or
Well,
any
Yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, we have solar. In fact, one of our headquarter facility in Decorah has a parking lot canopy that has solar on top of it. And we have financed community solar gardens that are rooftop canopies. And the city of Perry, Iowa, we were a financer of that, and they have a parking, actually an entertainment kind of pavilion and a parking structure that have solar above them. We are aware in Wisconsin, there's an organization called the Couillard Foundation that has a canopy structure that they build outdoor classrooms based on a canopy design for schools in the state through grants and other things that we are aware of. So there's all sorts of use cases for solar. That's the beautiful thing of it. You know, we always say the world is solar powered. The facts are there is plenty of sunlight in the world to power everywhere with renewable energy. But how do we get it economically distributed to the places that it's needed? And we believe our mission is to finance a sustainable tomorrow. That's our stated mission, and we think that a lot of that is going to have to be financed. The governments can do their part, and as Chris mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act is a wonderful, the largest federal investment in clean energy technologies ever. And you see in Europe and you see in a lot of other places similar actions by governments to help spur investment in industry and actually make direct government investments in this industry. But that's not going to be enough. There's banks and finance companies are going to have to get in the space in order to help provide capital to get these projects done. It's just a fact. And so we are one of, in the Midwest, we think very, very few that have a stated program around this. And I think you mentioned earlier that, Casey, that we are working with other banks to try to help them understand how this financing works. You know, we're one of thousands of community banks in this country. The United States is actually unique in the world that still has a community bank system. Most developed countries, in fact, all developed countries, rely on relatively few large banks to provide banking services and financing to their citizens. We have several thousand community banks still in the United States. Community banks are wonderful at keeping economic activity local. So, you know, in Decorah, Iowa, where we are from, our bank does a lot to try to provide philanthropic capital to several organizations in our community, certainly finance development projects and provide local investment and economic stimulus. We view what we're doing in the renewable energy space as maybe more geographically dispersed. It's in the 5 states in the Midwest, but it is still similarly local. It is similarly relatively small. The renewable energy community is not dissimilar from a small geographic community. You get to know people that are in it. And when we go to these conferences and we are out in our markets, we certainly develop relationships that we hope last a long time. So we've made this investment in Green Penny, and we're out there talking to folks about this. And our message to other banks is you need to get in the space. And one way you can do that is to work with us, let us be in the lead around some of these things. And you can participate, a banking term for basically you can take some of the, participate on some of the loans that we are doing, rely on our relationships and get the benefit of diversification in the renewable energy space, get the benefit of, as I mentioned earlier, pretty high quality credit. We have not had a lot of losses in this industry yet. And in our experience, we've had zero. And not have to make the investment in building a Green Penny, but you can ride the benefit of the revenue that comes from the loans that we are making. So we're out making that case a lot right now. The other thing that we are doing is we very much believe that everybody that's listening to this now and your friends and family that might have an interest in this space and an interest in keeping economics local. Distributed energy is a wonderful economic stimulus to local rural communities. because we're not getting our power from centralized utility power plants that might be hundreds of miles away, where all those jobs where those jobs live. We're keeping the energy local with local installers. Eagle Point Solar is a great example of that. A local installer out of Dubuque with branches all over the 3 Midwestern states, hiring and building jobs in communities all across those 3 states. There are lots of, we do business with over 150 installers that are like Eagle Point Solar, maybe got their start as electrician shops and are now venturing into solar. Those are wonderful, high-paying jobs that are residing in hundreds of communities across the Midwest. And so us being able to help finance that as an economic stimulus to those local communities, really important. And the other part of what we do is all of us have deposits at some bank that is taking those deposits and lending them out in ways that we don't control. So the question is, who are you banking with and what are they funding? Are your hard-earned deposits going towards things that might not be aligned with your values? They might be going to big national conglomerates that aren't providing economics that are local. Or if you're like us and you believe that climate change is real and a major threat to the planet and a major risk to the financial system, by the way, then are your deposits going to things like the fossil fuel industry that maybe you don't want to continue to happen? So if you bank at greenpenny.bank, where we're going to give you great service, we're going to give you really good rates, very competitive rates for your deposits. We're going to give you free ATM fees anywhere in the world. You're never going to have to pay an ATM fee. You can call us anytime and talk to real people. And more importantly, you can know that all of your deposits are going to go towards renewable energy projects. And you can go to greenpenny.bank and you can literally see a map of our impact of all the now 1,400 plus projects that we have done in our 5 Midwestern states, and literally look at the little pin at the exact location where those projects are. You can see what size it is. You can see if it's a residential project, a commercial project, an ag project, a nonprofit project, and you can track what the equivalent carbon reduction has been in the form of trees planted, internal combustion engine miles driven that would be eliminated, coal burned that is also eliminated, and the CO2 that's been reduced as a result. So we believe very strongly that people should use their money as their voice for environmental action. And one way to do that, everybody, whether you're a homeowner or a business owner or not, you can use your money as your voice by parking it with us and helping us do more of what we're trying to do in financing of the renewable energy transition. So,
I think that will, I think Katie Gerlach might be on our call, and she represents Better Together. And I think that the answer to that question would be music. Hi, Katie. Would be music to her ears because of the economic development, and the combination of that with the environmental would be very compelling. Yep. And I think the community bank aspect, I'm hoping that there are some of our community bankers on the call, but if they're not, I'll refer them to the recording so that they can hear what's going on.
Yep.
Can I ask one more question?
Let's get other people starting in the queue.
Okay,
we're down to our last 15 minutes. So
sure.
Okay, we have a lot of very sophisticated people on the call, and I'm really interested in hearing from Tyler Todd. Tyler is a CEO of the Watts organization, and they're very active developers. And I wondered, Tyler, what do you see as the barriers to being able to do this solar adaptation in Johnson County?
Good morning, Casey. Good morning, everybody. Good question. We have explored the idea, scratched the surface, I would say. We've not deployed it on any of our projects. Generally, we have a hard time penciling out the incentives. Now, it's good to know that the Inflation Reduction Act has maybe incentivized this some more, but generally we have a hard time penciling out to make it make sense. One of the other things that we run into is on most of our projects, we don't pay the utilities, the tenants pay the utilities. And so that also reduces our incentive to put it on a building, so.
And common area, I'm thinking about retrofitting versus building new, and it seems to me that, you know, if you want to connect all the meters, building new is really the only practical way to do it, unless you're doing common area costs, that kind of thing. But what's your take on that, retrofitting versus new? Do you see any possibilities there?
Yeah, we've explored that a little bit as well. But it does go back to that same issue where you're right, it's common areas and then the benefit is limited. We've always had a hard time penciling it out. That's really what it boils down to. But we have looked at both putting it on new projects.
Does it make a difference if it's Mid-America versus Alliant?
It's been a while since I looked at it, but it does seem like there was a difference. I don't know if it was between those two though. We've got some areas that we're also Lynn County REC. So at the time when we looked at it, it's probably been a little bit over a year since we looked at it in one of our big properties where we've got 16 rooftops. And it did make a difference which provider it was. And it seems like, and I can't remember which provider we had there. I think it's Mid-American. It seems like it was Alliant, and it seems like it was more beneficial because it was Alliant.
Well, thanks very much for joining us this morning, and I'm sorry to kind of put you on the spot, but I really appreciate your input.
Thanks for having me.
Could I see who else is on the?
Why don't we just ask people if they have questions?
Fair enough.
People that would like to,
Yeah, so question for Jason. So in terms of your loans, and so your the solar system becomes your secured asset. I'm
Yep.
just curious, how does your loan basically treat then the prospective sale if that occurs?
The prospect of sale, meaning if we have to
The
Like
owner of the
collect them?
system, the owner of the system basically sells their place, the system's on there, that's your asset, so.
Yeah, it's really good question. So, you know, we what we expect will happen is that if the average homeowner lives in their home for maybe 7 or 8 years, and so our loans on the residential side, we can go up to 20 years, and so very often they might outlive where somebody's going to live in the home. And so, you know, we would work with the homeowner, the purchaser of the home, to either take, refinance that loan and take it on, or we would expect that our loan would be paid off before the transition happens. And the mechanism for that is a homeowner, that's selling their home, if they were to stop paying our loan, of course, we have the right, these are secured loans, so we have the right to go collect on panels. They're selling the loan or selling their home with the benefit of solar on it. So we think there's inherent motivation to make sure that the solar facility keeps producing, and we would get either paid off or have a new loan with the new homeowner.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. That was basically answering the question, because I didn't know whether you had the option or the opportunity for that new buyer to basically take on that loan, or whether you had to pass it. So, okay.
Can I address that question?
Yep.
I was in the appraisal business for a lot of years, Steve, and what I found was that after 5 years, if you sell it back to the people who are actually using it, it's a very easy calculation. In other words, if you save them $10,000 a year, this would be a very big array, but if you save them $10,000 a year, then that cost divided by a discount rate, say 10%, and that has to be something over rate of financing and a capitalization rate and all that. I don't want to get too far into the weeds. But a 10% rate means that that array is worth $100,000 because that's your savings. And that's how it works on a commercial basis. I'm thinking you guys mostly do cost rather than value, but
Right.
cost is pretty close to, you know, initially, but for a resale, that's what I think you have to focus on.
Yeah, I really wasn't talking, sorry, I mean, when I'm talking about the aspect of valuation, I understand valuation, but for Jason, I was just trying to understand the prospects of sales and potential defaults, because he's taking his security on the system as
Right.
opposed to in the home itself. So, all right, thanks.
So I answered a question that Steve didn't have.
So we have some online questions.
Go for it.
Oh, they're there. Gary Scott is asking, many businesses and people rent their buildings. How can the building owner finance the solar roof and charge back to the renter based on usage?
Well, they certainly can. I mean, as Casey was just mentioning, there's a real benefit to folks who have the obligation of the utility expense on the building. So if you're renting your building and the renter is paying the utility expense, well, they're going to benefit from the net metering. They're going to benefit from a reduced utility cost because there's solar on their roof. There's real value there. And so, you know, one option would be, and you should be able to charge potentially higher rents for that building as a result. And, you know, you might not, this might be a personal point of view, and I actually have a rental property that has solar on it, and I don't charge sort of the equivalent. I don't charge, you know, I don't add basically what the utility payment would have been. I do something smaller than that, and the benefit to the renter is it's a fixed cost. So you don't see, you know, your summertime go up and your wintertime go up or down or whatever. You just have a relatively fixed, and you also don't see an escalator of your utility costs over time, which of course everybody's going to experience if you don't have renewable energy power generation. So yeah, there's definitely economic value that can be explained to renters, and literally you can show them the utility payments and the history around what the utility payments have been on that building, and you should be compensated for it, particularly if you're financing it. You know, there's real value there. So.
Jim Throckmorton?
I'm wondering if the owner of a property, I'm thinking residential property primarily, wants to electrify his or her home and install solar panels to provide much of the electricity.
Yep.
In Iowa City, where would one start? Now, I'm not asking about for me, because we have already basically electrified our home. But I'm asking for anybody who lives in the city, how would you start? Where would you go first?
Good question.
I don't know, Chris, do you want to take that one, or you want us to?
Jim, could you repeat that question just a little bit? I mean, I think you said if you're a homeowner and you want to electrify and add solar, where do you start?
Who do you go to first, Chris?
The banker. The banker or
You go to the banker, you go to a real estate appraiser, do you go to the only installer that I'm aware of at the moment, and that's Eagle Point? Who do you turn to first?
Well, I think you got to, that's okay. I see what you're asking. You got a number of things that you're trying to, understand possibly as a homeowner. It's a multi-part. Look at how efficient your home is. Tom Weisler from Mount Vernon is famous for saying that the cheapest way to save energy is just not to use it, or to invest in energy is not to use it. So make sure your home is efficient, that it's buttoned up, and then we'll do a solar analysis to see what your roof is capable of making for electricity, and that'll help you to understand then how much that expense is going to be, and then you can call Green Penny and say, I'd like to borrow this much money to make electricity. So I think that might answer what you're looking for, Jim.
So what I hear you saying, Chris, is that a person in Iowa City should contact Eagle Point. first. That's what I'm hearing. Is that what?
An installer.
Install and, yeah, contact an installer to
Like,
see
who are the
what it
other
would take to
install-
make
No, you
electricity
can
and the
find
cost
that
for
out.
it.
You can find that out by talking to Green Penny Bank and ask them who they've used and who they feel comfortable with.
Yep.
And then you have a couple of different options, then call the installer of your choice and, go from there, I would say.
Yeah, there's some really good, it's a really good, because if you go online and you search solar, or you search financing, or, solar financing, or you do these general search terms, and there's a dizzying amount of information that's out there. I mean, there's just a lot. And so, local reputable installers like Eagle Point are great places to start. Chris and team have lots of experience. I think you guys have done 1,500 or something solar projects over a number of years. You've been around a long time. We're lucky in Iowa. We have a lot of really reputable installers that are local. The Iowa Solar Energy Trade Association, ISETA, has a website, and there's a whole, the members that are there that are active is also a good place to start. Our advice to our borrowers is to stay local. There's lots of reasons to do that, but we're really fortunate. We've got some really great local installers, and this concept that Chris outlined of making sure your home is as efficient as possible to right size the system size is very well understood by installers, and so they'll help homeowners do an evaluation of what they should be doing to put the right size system up. And again, we usually encourage folks to get multiple estimates, just like you would any major purchase or any competitive bid. If you're redoing a home or doing a major project for a home, it's a good practice to do that. You'll get multiple perspectives. They're typically free. They may be a little bit more time consuming, but it's a good practice to do. And again, and if folks start with us, we've got resources on greenpenny.bank as well that provides advice on how to start and where to go, and kind of summarizes some of the things I just said and even more. So
I'm gonna have to, Cheryl's giving me the sign that she kind of wants to sign off. We're hoping to give an idea of where we might go next.
Well, that's what I was going to talk about for a few minutes.
And so we'd like to talk about that for a minute
Very
or
good.
so.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. And I wish we had another half an hour to talk about, answer questions and talk about this. I appreciate Jim bringing the conversation down to, kind of ground level. We've been thinking a lot in putting this series together. Okay, then what next? We've been having a very productive 30,000-foot overview of solar and some of the issues that people need to go through to expand solar, either on their own rooftop or for a community to be thinking about in enlarging its solar resources. When this breakfast series first started, David Osterberg and I wrote a op-ed piece for the Press Citizen and the Gazette about community scale solar, how to think about that. And we used that report that I referenced earlier, Iowa City Solar 2035. But we also quoted James McCallie, who's a professor at Iowa State University and who spoke at the Hubbard Lectures at the law school this fall. And he asserted that a community thinking about distributed generation, not grid tie, not the grid, not utility owned solar, but that putting 10% of the electricity load into distributed generation would make economic sense, would provide a lot of the benefits that Jason has talked about of local energy and all the benefits that it could accrue from that. So because distributed generation is more expensive than the electricity that comes across the transmission lines, that we should think very strategically about where that distributed solar should be. I should say a community should think very hard about where that should be and put it on the most important buildings or services in the community, the fire, the police, the government buildings, the schools, hospitals, nursing homes, vulnerable populations. But to think through a process of, if, for instance, he said 10% of your electricity load was distributed, where should that best be targeted? Over the next 10 years, thinking about that is kind of an exciting idea. And what we would like to propose is later this spring, pulling together people that would like to entertain that idea. What would, over the next 10 years, a initiative, a program look like that would try to really increase the distributed solar in Johnson County? So we're just beginning conversations about what such a meeting might look like, but keep an eye on your inbox, and we will let you know kind of how that is shaping up. Basically, try to understand where we are right now with distributed generation. It's very low. In Johnson County, it's less than 1% of the electricity load is solar. So we have a long ways to go. Where would we like to go? What kind of goals would it make sense to try to set for this region? How do we get there? And what are our next steps? We know there's a lot of support for solar in the community. We know there's a very strong research and educational resource available to us. And now we have, gradually building out this conversation about how to finance it and do this. So keep an eye on your inbox, as I say, for an announcement about what we're going to try to do next following this series, bring it down to projects in different communities and how we could foster that. Whatever is decided, we would like to meet back here next fall and see what we've accomplished in the meantime. Other than that, thank you very much. This has been a great series and I appreciate everyone's participation in it. And we'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Oh, I was going to ask everyone to wait to turn on their. Bye-bye.